Right now, a controversial pick. President Obama's selection of Chuck Hagel for Secretary of Defense has managed to anger some Democrats and many Republicans. Got to work at that. We're going to tell you why and what is at stake here for the president. And next, in the aftermath of the Newtown shooting, there's a run on guns. Meanwhile, the folks inside the Beltway are trying to find ways to tamp down gun violence. Have we reached a watershed moment in America? We will discuss. And later, will Lance Armstrong come clean? And if he does, what kind of a reception do we have in the land of second chances? Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thanks so much for joining us. It's Monday evening, January 7th, and I've been gone for a little bit, so a belated Happy New Year to you. Now, the president, he announced his picks for the top security jobs in the nation today, Director of the CIA and Secretary of Defense. But both men, they come with some baggage. Let's bring in our senior political correspondent, Andrew Whitman. He gives us the backstory. Andrew? If
you're looking for reason, or a lawmaker's looking for reason to object, there are some for these nominees, Rich. The less controversial of the two nominations announced today, John Brennan. He is President Obama's pick for CIA director. Brennan's possible link to enhanced interrogation techniques during the Bush years has caused some in Washington to question the choice. He has denied any involvement, but it's really Obama's pick for defense secretary that has Washington abuzz tonight. Former Republican Senator from Nebraska, Chuck Hagel. Hagel, a successful businessman who made millions in the cell phone industry before getting into politics. He's also a decorated Vietnam veteran. If confirmed, he'd be the first person of enlisted rank to later serve as Secretary of Defense.
Chuck Hagel is the leader that our troops deserve. He is an American patriot. He enlisted in the Army and volunteered for Vietnam. As I saw during our visits together to Afghanistan and Iraq, in Chuck Hagel, our troops see a decorated combat veteran of character and strength. They see one of their own.
But the Hagel pick has drawn fire from both sides of the aisle. From the right, Hagel's being criticized for his perceived lack of support for Israel. In 2008, Hagel upset many lawmakers when he referred to Israel's U.S. supporters as the Jewish lobby, saying, quote, "The Jewish lobby intimidates a lot of people up here."
But quite frankly, Chuck Hagel is out of the mainstream of thinking, I believe, on most issues regarding foreign policy. I expect the president to nominate people different than I would think. I'm going to vote for Senator Kerry. I don't agree with him a lot, but I think he's very much in the mainstream of thought. Chuck Hagel, if confirmed to be Secretary of Defense, would be the most antagonistic Secretary of Defense toward the state of Israel in our nation's history. He has long severed his ties with the Republican Party. This is an in-your-face nomination by the president to all of us who are supportive of Israel.
If Hagel is nominated, it is very difficult to imagine a circumstance in which I could support his confirmation. It's interesting. The president seems bound and determined to proceed down this path, despite the fact that Hagel's record is very, very troubling on the nation of Israel. He has not been a friend to Israel, and in my view, the United States should stand unshakably with the nation of Israel. And he has consistently advocated weakness with respect to our enemies.
That from the right. From the left, Hagel's being criticized for his stance on gay rights. Back in 1998, he opposed President Clinton's pick for ambassador to Luxembourg because he thought the ambassador or the nominee was, quote, openly aggressively gay. He's also been criticized for his opposition to the troop surge in Iraq.
Most dangerous foreign policy blunder in this country since Vietnam.
However, Hagel got a, quote, wholehearted endorsement from former Secretary of State Colin Powell today. Rich?
All right, Andrew, thank you very much. Let's bring in our panel tonight. Ed Cox, chairman of the New York State Grand Ole Party, Dominic Carter, political journalist and author, and Chris Shays, former Republican congressman from Connecticut. Guys, thank you very much. And most people think Brennan's going to get through here today. And most people think at the end of the day, Congressman, that the votes are there for Hagel. I'll get to the politics in a second, but the person. I've had an opportunity over the years to interview Chuck Hagel. He's a hard guy not to like. He shoots straight with you. He's got some depth to him, but he's ruffled more than a few feathers over the years. Were you surprised that Obama went with the pick, especially given the whole Susan Rice back and forth that he had to back down in the 11th hour on?
A little surprised, but the more I think about it, I think ultimately the Senate will confirm him. They'll confirm him because of how he's voted, not necessarily what he said, notwithstanding his comments about the ambassador and his vote against the ambassador. I think he gets it. I don't know what you think, Ed, but I think he gets
Well, look,
it.
there's a tradition going way back to Henry Stimson and FDR, Republican Secretary of War or Defense serving a Democratic president. Or we go back to Senator Cohn and Clinton, or Gates and Obama. But these are all men who are not controversial. They were all very distinguished, and they would see they could work on a bipartisan. Hagel here, particularly with respect to the surge, showed very bad judgment in the precise area where the Secretary of Defense is going to be very important. So I think, put aside all the atmospherics with Israel and Gates, that thing, I think he's going to have a very hard time getting, the way the Senate works, a very hard time.
He'll have a hard time, but will he get it?
It's going to be close. This is going to be close, and it's going to be very tough. And Obama's going to have to spend a lot of political capital on this when
and that
a
brings
lot
me,
of other
Dominic,
big issues
to the
are coming
math
up.
of it, which is, just think what we're going to be talking about, just for the balance of this show in the next 90 days. You got the president who's got to have the debt limit fight here. He's going to be talking about gun control. He's going to be talking about immigration reform. He knows the clock and how it ticks on the first 100 days of even your second term. If you pick somebody from the other party, you know you're going to tick off some of your own base here. But you always do it because it at least throws them a bone and ameliorates them. The harshest critics from him are coming from the right. The political calculation of Hagel, even if he loves the guy, what does he really get out of it? There were other capable people he could have picked.
That's the million-dollar question. And one has to wonder how much of the right's opposition to Hagel is for the fact that he endorsed Obama back in 2008. I honestly don't have the answer to your question because, again, in trying to appease the other party, he's more infuriating them with this announcement. But I agree with the congressman. I think at the end of the day that Hagel will make it through.
I don't think this is an appeasement pick. I don't think the president is doing this to try to get some Republicans behind him or get Republicans off his back. He and Hagel have a relationship going back to when they served in the Senate together, and he has called on Hagel for advice during his first term. So I think Hagel's the guy he wants in this job.
That's the key right there.
Do you think it literally, if he exchanged instead of Jewish lobby, Israel lobby, if he changed those two words, he still would have ticked some folks off here, but maybe it was inartful what he said, but it's true that the lobby and the influence of Israel is very powerful in Washington.
It was very unartful.
Yes, that's putting it politely.
I honestly, I don't think the criticisms that we're hearing about Hagel, his stance on gay rights or his stance on the Israel lobby, are the real reasons for the objection to Hagel from the Republican Party. I think it's two different issues. One is his turnabout on Iraq. He voted for the war and then opposed the surge. He was one of the first Republicans to come out and oppose the Iraq war after initially supporting it. And I think that may be a bit of an affront to the neoconservative push that some Republicans have in Washington. The other is he wants to reduce defense spending. He wants to reduce the Pentagon's budget. And I think that might be a place where Republicans, or a lot of Republicans, can't go. They can't be willing to support cuts to defense.
I'm surprised about, and maybe I shouldn't be any more congressman, but the Senate's a club. And he was there for a while. To one of your own, I mean, look at how they're going to treat Kerry right now. I mean, some of the harshest critics, we heard it. We saw Lindsey Graham, and we also saw McConnell, who threw him a bouquet when the guy left the Senate about what a great senator he was. And now these guys were like, that was then and this is now.
See, I have a feeling that Hagel was less patient than most senators when he was there, and I think he did offend a few folks. But in the end, I think the president wants someone who's tough, and there's no question, Hagel is tough.
And a Republican who's willing to cut the defense budget. Andrew, I think you're absolutely right on that, because that's necessary. That's where the president can be for spending cuts and with respect to balancing the budget in those whole discussions. The problem is, I think he's made a political mistake here. We'll have to spend a lot of political capital to get this done, and that is just And this is the president being very arrogant, which he's known to be. And in his arrogance, I think he's making a huge political mistake here.
The one thing his guys can do is they can count. So he knew he can get the votes for this at the end of the day. How fast he pushes it through, it'll be interesting.
The Senate's more than counting, though.
Yeah, fair enough.
It works.
Fair enough. All right, we jump to a quick break. But when we come back, we're going to turn to the issue of guns and the aftermath of the shooting in Newtown. People lining up at gun shows, not just across the country, but right in our region, right in Stamford, Connecticut, not that far from Newtown, all because of anticipation of new gun restrictions. But will those new gun restrictions actually materialize. We're going to tell you what we're hearing out of Washington now about a working group that's coming up with new rules for America. We'll get into that after this.